Yeah, I know, I'm milking Matt Walsh a little bit more here, but that's just because he's so ridiculous that every sentence that comes out of his mouth is complete trash. Remember a while ago when I talked about his absurd claims about mental illness? Yeah, well, don't worry, I don't remember either since it was over a year ago. Well, anyway, it looks like he's not quite done yet because now we got another video on the same topic, as well as prescription drugs in general. Wonderful. Exactly the way I wanted to spend my holidays, watching Matt Walsh tell me why he knows about a certain topic more than the experts do.
It's hard to think of any industry that's enjoyed more success over the past 20 years or so than Big Pharma. More than 131 million people, that's 2/3 of all adults in the United States, report that they're taking at least one prescription drug currently. That's a significant increase from the year 2000, when around half of American adults said they were doing so.
Okay, but you said prescription drug in a general sense, not specifically related to mental health, right? According to the CDC, about 20% have received some sort of mental treatment in the last year, a piece of data we collected in 2020, but that includes both drugs and also therapy. Honestly, 1 in 5 isn't even that many if you ask me, considering this is any form of mental treatment over a period of an entire year. Regarding prescription drugs in general though, yes, that number is significantly higher, but you'll have to explain or prove that this is a bad thing. Don't get me wrong, overprescribing medications is a problem, and that's a problem that exists everywhere in the world, especially for developed countries. The overprescription of pain medications and antibiotics is something to be very concerned about. I made a video on this topic a while back actually, but it seems to me that Matt, you are just making this claim for the sake of making the claim. And as we'll see, you won't even have the slightest grasp on reality when it comes to prescription drugs.
The percentage of people taking 5 or more prescription drugs has nearly doubled since the turn of the century. Spending on prescription drugs in that period has more than tripled.
Indeed, and the increase in spending on prescription drugs is something else to be concerned about, but not in the way you're thinking. When it comes to medication, especially one that is required to save your life, it needs to be affordable so that the people who need them can easily get access to them. But that's a topic for a whole different video.
Drugs that supposedly treat psychological issues like unhappiness or lack of self-control have done especially well. From 1991 to 2018, SSRI prescriptions increased by over 3,000%.
I don't know where you got your numbers from, it's definitely gone up, but I don't know about 3,000%. Whatever, either way, I don't see this as a bad thing. To me, it tells me that more people are seeking the help they need. Again, there's never been a better time than today to admit you might have a mental health disorder. There's never been a better time than today to seek help and get yourself properly diagnosed. It's kind of like how conservatives are scratching their heads wondering why more people are trans today than before. It's not because the percentage or number of trans people increased, it's because more people are willing to come out as trans. The same can be said about mental disorders. It's not even just about willingness to seek help, but also as time passes and science progresses, we understand more about mental illnesses and how to classify them. For example, you can't really seek help to get ADHD medication if ADHD hasn't even been known yet. So yeah, as more people bravely put themselves out there to seek mental support, it's no wonder there are more drugs circulating out there for mental health.
Given Big Pharma's tremendous success, you'd think that by now, they would have solved a lot of the health problems facing Americans, or at least made progress in resolving these problems.
What? What do you expect? That with the success of pharmaceutical companies, scientists are expected to find a magical switch that can just cure someone of depression, manage someone else's ADHD, and eliminate obesity as a whole? I don't think you'll understand how this works. Mental health is a complicated topic, and it's not just a, here's a magical pill that just cures you. No, our scientific development has been to better the management process of that, and that includes researching the very drugs that you yourself are against. The availability of these drugs are the current management solutions towards not just mental health, but many other diseases too. And we are stepping in the right direction here. Comparing long-term is a better idea here, and compared to when we didn't have medication, our life expectancy shot up, so much so that we have to worry about new things such as cancer.
But the opposite is true. Average life expectancy is declining.
Life expectancy in the United States recently taking a huge plummet was due to COVID-19.
Suicide rates are going up.
According to our trusty source, the CDC, suicide rates dipped in 2019 and 2020, then it started slowly climbing. So I guess by your logic, pharmaceutical companies did something right in 2019 and 2020 and then stopped caring after that, which by the way is absolutely ridiculous. You can't just cite a big overarching general idea about life expectancy and suicide rates, draw a causation relationship, and then imply that's because of the failure of our mental health treatments. Absolutely ridiculous.
So are the rates of obesity, drug addiction, cancer among young adults. How is that possible?
Okay, at this point you're just throwing out a bunch of numbers that mean absolutely nothing within this context. There are a variety of reasons that contribute to the rate of any one of those things you mentioned, and each would take up an entire video by itself. But at this point you're just trying to give the idea that things are going bad, and making the implication that, oh no, our mental health prescriptions and drugs are bad, blah blah blah.
How is the pharmaceutical industry succeeding financially while failing in every other area that matters? How can they have so many people on so many medicines, and yet at the same time, everyone is only getting sicker and less healthy?
Well, for starters, just because the science is developed doesn't mean anyone can have access to them. Not to mention that there are a ton of factors that come into play here, including politics. If you're truly a proponent of increasing the quality of life of people, including life expectancy, lowering cancer deaths, and the longevity of public health, then you'd be a proponent for things like universal healthcare. But I doubt you'd be in support of that, and that's because at the end of the day, you're supporting a harmful narrative and you don't actually care about people.
Part of the answer is that many drugs created by Big Pharma aren't even intended to alleviate health problems anymore. They're designed instead to cause more death and suffering.
I knew Matt was a conspiracy theorist, but holy Jesus Christ, this was unexpected.
Big Pharma is churning out record amounts of sterilization drugs, abortion drugs, suicide drugs, especially in Canada, where the government has begun putting down the undesirables who don't even have a terminal illness. They are euthanizing human beings like stray dogs, and hardly anyone is objecting to it.
What? Last I checked, the government wasn't the one making decisions to kill people. Assisted suicide is way different than that, you fucking idiot. If you're at your deathbed and would like to end your own life, I don't see why anyone would be against that as long as you're making an informed, conscious decision about it. The government isn't going around killing people as they please. Jesus Christ, you are insane for even wording it the way you did. Quote, putting people down like stray dogs. My God, you are insufferable.
More than half of all abortions are now performed using drugs from pharmaceutical companies. So-called puberty blockers, which can cause lifelong complications, are now prescribed to children under the age of 18, more than twice as often as they were just a few years ago.
Okay, let's talk about that one by one. Yes, most abortions are done using abortion drugs, and that's because most decisions to get an abortion is relatively early on in the pregnancy process. An abortion drug is used more so in the first stages of pregnancy, right after an embryo implants itself into the uterus wall up to 12 weeks of gestation, and even after that under medical supervision. It's easy, can be self-administered, and relatively safe. But of course, Matt, you're going to interpret this as an increase in human suffering because it kills the fetus. But no, we all know it greatly increases the quality of life of women in the country, but again, that's a topic for another video. Second, you mentioned puberty blockers, which I actually made an entire video on it before. It's essentially to give people more time to consider and explore their sexuality before making the transition that is puberty. This one we're just going to fundamentally disagree on since you don't agree with transitioning at all, which to that I say, mind your own fucking business.
The rest of Big Pharma's catalog, the drugs that are at least allegedly beneficial to patients' health, have had a lot of marketing behind them. Other than New Zealand, we are the only country that allows drug companies to market directly to consumers. This means that the pharmaceutical industry can sell not just the medication, but also the illness that the medication is supposed to cure. Do you have such and such symptoms? Then you might have this disease. Here's a drug that can help. Diagnosis and prescription in one 30-second advertisement. How convenient.
Advertisement of drugs is heavily regulated here in the United States, where they are required to only advertise the specific effects approved by the FDA, list out all the side effects, and mention statistics supported by evidence. And at the end, they usually mention, ask your doctor about this. So basically, the decision is between you and your doctor. Because these drugs have to go through a prescription. You can't make the decision to buy and use it on your own, but instead you need a doctor's approval. Now, don't get me wrong, the vast majority of doctors are honest, but some do end up recommending a particular drug more than others due to marketing and in rare times even bribery. But that's a completely different topic that has nothing to do with drug advertisements to the consumers themselves. Anyway, I'm not sure why you brought this up. Were you planning to tie this into why something like life expectancy has gone down?
Fortunately for Big Pharma, the U.S. government has also granted them immunity from lawsuits, even when their products injure people, which they quite often do.
Huh? In what universe are pharmaceutical companies immune to lawsuits? In what universe is any company immune to lawsuits? Hell, even the government itself can be sued. When a drug sold by a pharmaceutical company injure people, especially for overlooked reasons, that very much is grounds for a lawsuit. Hell, just the most recent one that made the news. Johnson & Johnson went to court for their baby powder. Now, that being said, there are some protections given to drug companies regarding vaccines and their expected side effects, but that's a long shot from being the same as just straight up all-around immunity, which you just stated. In other words, you just flat out lied to your audience. Alright, so we're going to split this video to multiple parts since there's just too much to cover. Thank you to Fireshard, Alan Morton, Miss Fixit, Rick Klenn, and I'll see you in part 2.